Hi, everybody. This is David, and welcome to the Module 5 Fireside Chat for Inclusive Classroom Strategies. So this is right at the end of Module 5. We'll be talking about some things from Module 5 and then also from Module 6, which begins tomorrow, Monday, November 6th, and we'll run through Sunday, November 19th. So then we'll have another Fireside Chat during that module. This is the Module 5 Fireside Chat. So looking ahead, first of all, let's look ahead to Module 6. We introduce Universal Design for Learning, UDL. So we think of Universal Design for Learning as something that the teacher does, more or less like differentiated instruction, different ways to have information presented for visual learners, for auditory learners, for tactile learners, and so on. Also then using different modes, and this is where I think it's very critical, different modes for students to convey their learning, okay? Differentiated instruction as it involves students. So UDL, Universal Design for Learning, meaning that you might create a rubric, just a flat-out rubric, and students then can use different ways to be divergent to demonstrate learning through meeting that rubric. I saw this in a classroom, and the teacher had an assignment set up, and students needed to write, or not write, but they need to convey understanding of, it was a unit about the Great Depression. And it was fascinating because the students could, the teacher had a rubric, and you know that you needed to understand how it came to be. You needed to understand the people impacted by it. And then the impacts on society and these different areas that had to be demonstrated. And the teacher then had examples. So you could actually create if you were to have a garden back in the Great Depression, a lot of people had gardens. They were encouraged by the government, grow your own food. What would your garden look like? How much would you plant and what would you plant and things like that. And then recycling and getting the most out of things and how that might have had an impact like on the current recycling processes that we have in the country, and what you do for entertainment communities, for example. I remember this it was very impactful as the teacher was going through and showing in the classroom. But a student had brought in a sheet, part of a sheet, and then had drawn like part of a movie scene on it, and then this was up on a wall, and then had a little projector aimed at it, and then a little narrative saying that communities, to provide entertainment to people, and then also to save money, would have a film that they would project on the back of a building, or they would put up a sheet between two posts, and they would do this. And this was very common during the Great Depression. Again, and then how that was used as a way of, again, getting people together, entertaining, keeping morale up, what morale meant, stuff like that. So fascinating, but we're talking about UDL, making sure we think in Module 6 that it's not only for the teacher on delivering instruction different ways, but it's different ways for students to be very divergent on their ways to demonstrate learning. Because how often is it where it's like you have to turn in a paper, or maybe you get to do something like the diorama or whatever it is, but I mean it's pretty much like through written format, and it's totally going in the different direction of saying, maybe you can demonstrate this. I think somebody did, and somebody did do this, a student did this, and it was really cool because the teacher had the students kind of look at other things that had been done in the past, and then the teacher would have them look at the rubric and with other students and saying, is what you're doing kind of matching the rubric or not, or how would you rate? Are you meeting all the criteria to get the 4, or is it really only a 3? And work with another student, a couple other students, to get some feedback. But one student did I think it was the War of the Worlds radio podcast or not, show. I think that was the 1938, but it was kind of during that, still in that Great Depression era. But then how people were, how that form of entertainment became misinterpreted because there was such a high feeling of possible, invasion, by, it was very much the starting of what could be a war with, Germany, and very tense times, knowing what was going on overseas. So just that, people were very susceptible. And also, as science was advancing, you still had a lot of people that weren't understanding science, and this was just very overwhelming to people. So it was really cool, because this student then did like a modern day War of the Worlds type of podcast, and then you could play it, and it was like 2 minutes long, but it would be like, what if there was, like the space invasion today, and people are getting it, notified through social media, and then one of the differences was, that people, people would understand that wasn't happening because they've just seen this so many times in movies, and plus they'd be able to fact check it where you couldn't fact check it back in the past. But just fascinating. So the DPI has a UDL website, or webpage. You can go to it. It is phenomenal, and it's one of those things. I'm sure it's super underutilized. People don't go to it a lot, so check it out. It is linked in Module 6. So your assignment is, you have YouTube videos of UDL, so go on and search for those. And one of the things, please scroll beyond the first 3 that come up. There'll be a ton. But what happens is a lot of people say, here are the 3 that I found, or the 2 that I found, or whatever. And it's always like the first 2 that show up. So please do that. Scroll and search for different videos about UDL that we can share with each other. So hopefully we're all getting different experiences versus we're all looking at the same video that we found. Assignment, demonstrating UDL. One person, they posted a Powtoon video, which is kind of like making your own cartoon of and in that they had the demonstration of, here's what universal design for learning is, and it was done in kind of a cartoon format. Another person made a blog post. I posted an example of what somebody did also. One student did a 5-minute video, like a podcast, but a video podcast, and it was universal design, and he was showing a few ways to teach guitar, like a very fundamental part of teaching a guitar, as if he was teaching a student in a music class. And I thought that was really cool, because at the start, the student did a little 1-minute intro saying, I've never really done this before. And it just used the camera that was on their laptop, and it got and said, here's the purpose. We are just going to learn, the proper way to hold the guitar and the main parts of the guitar. And then it was really cool. So it was like a 5-minute video, and that was it, and posted it to this class and inclusive strategies. And it was phenomenal. The student posted afterwards that he felt really cool that he had done this and had never really thought about doing things like this for his own students, because he always was in the mode of, the PowerPoints and that lecture kind of format. So it was exciting. There's an article about special ed cooperatives. I think that's a terrific way to share professional development, share training and expertise. You can also share resources. That gets a little tricky, but working with cooperatives, read that article. It came out actually last year in School Business Affairs magazine, and I had written the main article for that issue. It was, I believe, in February of 2017, this year. And this article happened to also be in there, so I immediately captured it. It was very well done. So teacher assembled materials on instructing Native American youth are also included. Those are from a friend of mine who taught on an Indian reservation, and I think you can get an idea from that to just different ways to highlight culture and diversity through instruction. So continue to be active posters. A few of you have fallen behind, okay? So I know that. You've contacted me and let me know. And so when we go through and do our updates, sometimes I don't have a lot of things to share. And I'm watching. I mean, I know that you're accessing the class, but make sure that you post whenever there is a due date next to something. So if you haven't made all of your posts, go in and do them now. Make sure you go in and do any posts in Module 5 that you haven't done. Make sure you're checking the grade book to make sure you're not missing anything. It's updated through modules 1 through 4. But yes, please continue to be active posters. We have 1 month to go. It's November 5th. We're recording this right now. I'm recording this, and December 8th is the last day of class. Your Bill Porter plan is due. So we have a month, and everything is out there. All the modules are available right now. So please continue to be active posters. All modules are open. The Bill Porter plan, when you get to that, so now it outlines what to do. That's really made to be written in a story type format. Like, here's an example. So it can be, and you can take some liberty in how you frame this, but it's not a research paper, but it's meant to be a paper to include a lot of things that have been covered in this class regarding inclusive practice strategies. So here could be a way that you start out. I was made aware today by my principal that we have a new student starting by the name of Bill Porter, and Bill will be in my 4th grade class. And here are steps that I'm going to take to learn about Bill and to learn about cerebral palsy. And we haven't had a student with cerebral palsy at our school for as long as I can remember, so here are some resources I'm going to find. Here are some people I'm going to contact or organizations. Here's how I'm going to help teachers become aware. Here's how I'm going to help students become aware. I think there's like a book you can get, from a lot of school libraries, like Taking My CP to School and things like that. Really, that's what I'm looking for. And then when you get into accommodations and things like that, that dive into technology. Okay, you're going to see the video on Bill, so you're going to know that Bill is not going to be a very fluent typer. Doesn't mean he can't type. Bill does have disfluent speech, or does have dysarthric speech, meaning some slurring, not as easy to understand. But again, if Bill did have some speech therapy, worked on articulation, it's likely probably be pretty intelligible in known context, that people would understand him. One thing right off the bat I'm just going to put out there is people will write, students will write, we will have speech to text software that Bill can use, like Dragon Naturally Speaking. Okay, that probably won't work because Bill's speech is pretty dysarthric or pretty slurred. But you can have predictive text software like CoWriter. That would work great, where you start typing a couple letters and all of a sudden word options come up, or phrase options. So just different ideas. And with this, you might go online and go to Pinterest, just type in some searches of common assistive technology for people with, or students with cerebral palsy. And you're going to get some ideas right there. So you can craft this any way you want for Bill, but please make sure that you are challenging yourself and coming up with some things, to that effect. And also make sure at the end of the Bill Porter plan, you're connecting up with both in-school clubs that Bill might participate in, such as like student council, things like that, and community things like the community, that's important, county human services to know, what's available, Lions Camp, Easter Seals, things like that, United Cerebral Palsy. Awesome. All these are great connections. So you might say, well, I'm not going to be a classroom teacher. I'm a specialist, a reading specialist, or I'm going to be in some other role. Okay, then take that role and still just imagine the principals come to you and say, I need you to take a lead role in this with another teacher, and both of you, to help us prepare for welcoming Bill into our school community, because we haven't had a student with cerebral palsy here for a long time, and this is going to be new with teachers, and we want to make sure that we answer teachers' questions, we answer students' questions, and that we are prepared for Bill. And not that you have to have everything worked out, like, per se, and we know that it's going to be a work in progress. We're going to get to know Bill, we're going to change things and whatever, but there's going to be certain, ways you're going to go about preparing yourself for Bill, and a lot of things that we've covered in this class you can use. So, dun, 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 dun. Let's get into some shout-outs. Shout-outs. Allie, when writing about parallel teaching, you stated, the issue I see with parallel teaching is that while both teachers may have the same information and are knowledgeable about the content, he or she may have different styles or might shorten or lengthen specific parts of the lesson. So meaning you can have parallel teaching, but, and you can have, here's exactly the same lesson we're going to deliver, but the two teachers deliver the lesson differently, or sometimes significantly different. and part of that might too come from the experiences a teacher has had. So I mean, if it's a lesson about agriculture or something like that, and the teacher grew up on a farm, they're going to probably deliver that instruction different than if somebody grew up in the city, just the way that it is. So understanding too that the students aren't going to get the identical style and probably content of delivery, and I don't think that's a bad thing, though. I mean, I think it's going to be I think a strength in instruction comes from a little variation in incorporating that personal expertise of the teacher and experiences, and pulling that expertise and knowledge out of the students, what they already know. So yeah, and the big thing is like that students have access to the two different teachers at different times, so it's not like they're always getting the same instruction from the one parallel teacher, that gets switched up. So my thought on that too is this also involves subjective reality. So let's say you and I, we both look at a car, and the question is, what color is the car? And you say green, and I say gray. So that involves, the beam of light, the beams of light coming down are the same that are hitting that car, and those photons coming off and hitting into our eyes, and the rods and cones and all of that. But maybe there is something different with my eyes because of a certain filter or a certain way that I process those, that I do see that car as being gray. To me, that car is gray. To you, that car is not, what I say, blue or green or whatever, but it's a different color. So not that either of us is wrong, but again, it's based upon sometimes how we've processed things in our reality. So I just think that's important too with parallel teaching, because if we're both teaching something, how we have interpreted that, or our experiences within our context, is going to shape, again, how we're going to instruct that. And we might do that in a way that is completely accurate to our understanding of something, but we've had a different context or different filters we've processed that through. So Skylar, continue to be an active pollster, Skylar. You've done a nice job reminding us to be very aware of the efficacy of data. You are our data check person, the person saying, hey, let's go back to what the research says and things like that, and the numbers, and just reminding us that, yeah, we need to do that. We need to be aware of that. So Skylar, just please continue to introduce that into our discussions. Very important. Selena, when offering your thoughts about station teaching, you wrote, however, students could easily get out of hand and be too difficult for the teacher at that station to handle. Yeah, there is a risk with station teaching because it does not have as much oversight to it. It can have structure, but it doesn't necessarily have oversight to it, and the student needs to interpret the instructions that are being given. Probably doesn't have as much of an opportunity necessarily to ask questions too. So I think it's important to have rubrics in the stations to demonstrate what the expectations are from the stations, and maybe have 2 to 5 students, but also don't get too rigid with the stations. Let the students explore, and they're made to be kind of divergent, not convergent, because if it's convergent, you really don't need a station to do that. So 4K sites. I've been to a ton of 4K sites over my career, and 4K sites are very big into station teaching. So here's the station, when you're learning about counting and things like that. So there's numerous things you're going to count. There might be a little store scenario set up and things like that. So measurement, building those concepts through stations, understanding colors, literacy, the story stations. You put your headphones on, and there's a book you can listen to as you're turning the pages and things. But so I think it's really big in 4K sites. But yeah, nonetheless, creativity can be amazing when students are given opportunities to experiment without everybody watching them. So that's what I like about station teaching. You kind of be yourself, and it's cool when it's done at middle and high school levels. So Lisa K. All right, because to Lisa. But Lisa K., you wrote, one thing that stuck out to me was the effect that experience has on a team's ability to co-teach, meaning the experience of the teachers. Okay, the teams with more veteran teachers / paraprofessionals were more skilled at co-teaching than the newer employees. So yeah, my thought on it. First, thanks for pointing that out. Co-teaching requires professional development and common planning time, meaning that if you don't have those components there, you're not going to have successful co-teaching. Most likely, veteran teachers will have had time over their career to have had, work together, receive the same type of professional development, and hopefully they've had time then to develop lessons during co-planning time. Whether that's happened or not, that's hard to say, but it's more likely, again, if the teachers have been in the district longer. One of the things I want to point out, though, is, I've seen co-teaching be effective with new teachers as well as with veteran teachers. I think it's probably more of a structure issue in making it successful for everyone, meaning that there is common planning time and that the regular education teacher and the special education teacher are trained on how to co-teach. And something I've seen districts do is they'll create like Google Docs and for classes, and they'll expect that both of those teachers are kind of going in, the regular education teacher, the special education teacher supporting in that classroom or co-teaching in that classroom, to go in and to kind of develop these lesson plans together in the shared document and stuff, but without really any designated planning time. So it's like you go in, if you've got a prep third hour, I'll go in, I've got a prep seventh hour, and then, that doesn't work. Okay, that's not the way to do that. And so there are some benefits in Google Docs if people are working together and they have common planning time, or else, they come back to it, they think of something and they put it in there. But just having a Google Doc that you're working asynchronous in is not common planning time for lessons. So Jared, you wrote in a response to Selena, as a music teacher, do you think your subject is more suited towards team teaching? You can adapt to intelligences and abilities. Music class is about enjoying music and trying your best. It's low pressure compared to other classes. A perfect stage for inclusion of special education students and diversification of instruction. So I actually deliver push-in speech-language services in music classes. So I found it to be kind of exactly what you've said, Jared. Personally, is I found it to be a very conducive environment for delivering push-in special education services. Cadence has a big part to do with speech language, with articulation, with just putting the delivering of phrases. That there is a lot that can be taught in speech language through music. And I also, so last week I received a Scoob, Skoog. You can look it up on YouTube. Watch some pretty interesting videos. It's like a foam rubberish type cube with different colors, and you press it, and it's its own instrument. It's really cool. And I'm going to start using that with some students who are developing some communication skills, where the stage I'm at with a couple students is getting them to interact with something else, like on a directive, like, and in music class, it's very similar, like, okay, you make a choice of a tambourine or a drum, okay, and then, like everyone shake the drum or shake the tambourine now. And so I co-plan with that teacher once a week, and I have 2 sessions that I am in that classroom, and that is a teach and assist model. I am assisting, although once in a while it'll be a true co-teach, and that's happened, but otherwise it's a teach and assist model. So Rebecca, in sharing your thoughts about shared or team learning, okay, or shared or team teaching, you wrote, having someone co-planning and then teaching the lesson with me will be a huge relief in knowing that someone is there with fresh ideas to help me modify lesson plans. This really works well if you have someone who has co-taught before, that you're teaming up with, because they're going to know what that's like. So team teaching offers huge advantages also if a teacher is absent, okay? Because what happens, we have a teacher who's absent, and then a sub comes in, and even the best subs kind of just are able to manage the classroom just to get it through that day, because they don't know the students that well. so whatever they're carrying out with the lesson plan, let's be honest, they're just kind of carrying it out, keeping the wheels going for a day. But if you do have co-planning and co-teaching, it also gives you that advantage of if one person is gone, instruction can continue forward. And it is great for people with different experiences in co-teaching, different amounts of time in teaching in general, that they can learn from one another. And we tend to see where the thought is that the younger teachers will, or I want to say younger, but I mean the teachers who are younger to the profession, newer to the profession, will learn more from the veteran teachers. And I think that is 50-50 today. Back, when I started, it was probably that way, that you would get mentored by and when you were assigned a mentor, it would be a teacher who had been teaching for 20 or plus years. Now I've seen new teachers assign mentors, and the mentor might have 3 to 5 years of experience. So it is one of those things, and it's done because maybe that person it is chosen that they're going to be the best person they judge to match up with them, because maybe this person is I don't know, has shown some competency with incorporating technology, not that veteran teachers wouldn't, but into lessons, and I think they're just using all of their resources, schools, of saying, if we're going to assign a mentor to a teacher, we don't necessarily have to assign a mentor based on years in the school. We can assign someone who has been here 3 to 5 years in a mentor role. So I just think it's a different way of thinking. So let's move on. Dun, 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 dun. All right, we have 4 sheets. We're on page 3. So Kelly, in your scavenger hunt, you describe the math teacher as, he uses Schoolology and Notability for every assignment. So students are required to use their iPads to follow along and engage in the material, all on their iPads. So, all right, I think that's great, actually. I think there's much native adaptability, such as increasing text or image size, text-to-speech, and so on, built into iPads, and actually into like Chromebooks and things like that. So the devices themselves start to take down some of these barriers to inclusion, because again, you can have that. You can have auditory format. You throw in some earbuds or something like that. You can, for students, even if there's additional practice, you can jump right in. If you need to get into definitions and terms like that, and link out to other instructional, resources that can all be built right into the assignment. So it's interesting, though. Not all schools, and I've found this. I mean, I find this still today. Not all schools embrace personal technology in the classroom, like iPads or Chromebooks. Especially there are some schools, you can't use your phone, your smart device. So I don't know. I don't feel I have mixed emotions about that, because I think you should be able to use a phone. And I know the issue then is, well, students are texting other students and so forth. But I mean, it's become so ubiquitous with how we learn. I mean, if we want to know what the weather is, if we want to know the distance from one place to another, if we want to know, reviews of something before we purchase it, we're going on our smart device. So I don't think I would lock it out as much as some classrooms are doing. But still, I do understand the side of, yes, if you're on it, you can quickly check, hey, what are the Facebook updates, or what else has been shared through social media, or like I want to go in and during a break time, instead of doing something academic, I can get in and do a little bit of gaming or something like that. So again, I see both sides, but it's really cool that those iPads are being used, again, because of the native technology, which increases this universal design for learning. Because it's like going down the street. So they just did this not too far, a block away from where I'm at right now, is they took out the ends of the sidewalks, and then they curved both of them down, and put the traction bars in and stuff like that. So it's easier for the people walking, that they don't have to step up over the curb. But if you're pushing something, kids on a bike, stuff like that, and obviously if you're using a wheelchair or something to that effect. So I also like Google Docs where students can share documents, and the different Google Classroom resources that are available, because then students can access those from anywhere. I like that if the school sets it up that way. So Lisa R. Lisa, you wrote about the Constructivist Theory, so I appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. It is one of my favorite theories, and you note it. I also think about underserved populations that have very little experience with things that other children have experienced, like going to the zoo or a museum. They might have a hard time relating to learning about this stuff if they have never experienced it. So constructivist theory may not work as well with young children or children who have had little experiences with things. So I agree. And we see this a lot on standardized tests where there'll be experiences, that will reference something like a trip to the farm or whatever. And it's like a kid that grew up in the city never experienced that. So making sure that the assessments are matching the experiences that the students have had. Now, we're in this phase where we can do a lot of virtual reality type experiences. I actually participated in one which was like a virtual reality of what it would be like if you were walking on the moon. This was some specialized, devices and things like that, but it was really cool. And then there's a lot that can go with that. Now, I think there will have to be decisions made of, do you do a virtual reality trip to the museum or do you do the trip to the museum? Because virtual reality will always be that virtual. It's not going to be authentic reality. Now, it's better than not having the experience, but I think there has to be a balance there. So, and it comes out to how much for time and how much for budget. I mean, too, if you're doing a virtual reality field trip, you can do a virtual reality field trip and not have all the time of getting coats on and getting the time in the bus and all of that type of stuff. So I think we're at a very fascinating fulcrum point for this type of education, and it needs to be a mix of both. But as you said, to talk about experiences that students probably haven't authentically had, such as a trip to the zoo, trip to a farm, or, even understanding a garden. I noticed that. I had specifically one student talked about, felt she had a distinct advantage that her parents were farmers and that they had like gardens and things when she got into a class in college her first year, and it was something about sustainability, but she was, she knew about, farming and agriculture firsthand and had lived that, but then had other students in the class when they, built, or I think they had, they planted a garden and things like this, and you had to figure out kind of what your harvest would be, what's going to grow, what's not going to grow, and other figures that went in. So for her, it was very natural. She had all these experiences. She knew what to do. For others, it wasn't. So it was one of those things where she said, I felt the teacher could have done a little bit more in recognizing that, hey, some students, they've only lived like in the city, quote unquote, so that the green that they've seen is mowed lawns. That's it. So I appreciate I appreciate your post. Danielle, in response to a classmate's post, you wrote, one teach, one assist. I can see how this model will be beneficial helping special education students and also students who are struggling and need a little more help. I see this as possibly a component to response intervention for kids who are not quite ready to be labeled special ed, or hopefully wouldn't be labeled if they had response to intervention, and their skill levels and experiences were raised, that they wouldn't need special education. But I agree. I see the connection that you're making there with RTI. However, it could create seclusion if the same children are the ones always getting extra help, and stigmas could be attached to the child. That's a great point. It's a great point, because here's the thing. Once you get to push in services in co-teaching and teach and assist, especially, one teach, one assist, if you're right, students are always getting, the same students are always getting the same assistance or getting assistance, it doesn't take long for everybody to figure out those are students with special needs. And then you do create this environment of singling those students out. And this is part of the licensure issue in Wisconsin. Wisconsin has very much of a silo licensure structure, meaning that, if you're licensed to teach this, then a special education teacher, you really shouldn't be helping out students that do not have disabilities. And it becomes this whole funding thing, and actually the state can jump in and take away some of the funding to the district. This rarely happens, but I mean, there can be an argument of saying, you're using flow-through dollars from the feds to, which are only supposed to be for students with disabilities, and your state categorical aid for your special ed teacher. I mean, it gets goofy. But states like Minnesota are much more relaxed with that and saying, hey, you know what, when we want to foster co-teaching, want to foster what's best for students in response to intervention times. So we're okay, more or less, with teachers being able to help all students. It doesn't mean that you suddenly become a biology teacher and you're teaching biology, if you're the special education teacher. But it does say that if you're in that classroom, you can develop a co-taught lesson that you can help all students. Again, that's the approach I think we need to get to, is address part of this through licensure in the state. So, very thoughtful to bring up how that creates kind of a seclusion effect. Courtney, during your scavenger hunt, you noted one thing I noticed while observing and reflecting on the co-teaching models is the teachers must have a good working relationship and be dedicated to co-planning for the models to be successful. I agree. And at the same time, teachers can't be excused from team teaching because they don't want to do it. So you talk about teachers being dedicated to team teaching. I have sensed some teachers who are great at team teaching and they want to do it, like they're asking to team teach, and this is the teacher I want to teach with. And there are other teachers who say, I don't want to co-teach. I don't want to do that. And the reason is, one, they either are fearful, like, I haven't done this before, I don't know what to do, or like, I don't want to have how I'm evaluated excuse me, partly put in the hands of another teacher. So what if the class doesn't perform all that well? Is it, and I don't, I don't get along with this other teacher, like our styles are just like way too different. Well, I think there's a professional discussion there. If you can't get along with someone in a teaching environment, your styles are just too different. You bring that up to a principal, and hopefully if you can't work it out, there's a reassignment, and you'll have someone else that you can work with. I mean, let's be honest, like, not everyone's going to be able to work with everyone, okay? But I think there is this tendency, and I've seen this, and it is where people should be team teaching, but they're like, I don't get along with this person, or it's not kind of for me, and then it's like, okay, and the administration just goes with it. So I do think at some point, it's not an option whether you team teach or not. And this whole thing of teachers like saying, I don't want to team teach because if the class doesn't do well, my performance eval might not be as high. And I'm afraid, like, if we get ranked as teachers, I'm not going to be ranked as high. That was a big fear, like 3-4 years ago. It was, working its way around the state a lot. That's kind of gone away. But I can kind of see that side of it too. So let's talk to Allison. Dun, 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 dun. Allison. Okay. Allison, hey, please continue to actively post to the course. I appreciate your previous post about the emphasis on teaching students to understand the perspective of others. Perspective taking is so big in inclusive practices. So I'm looking forward to reading more of your post, and especially perspective taking. It's going to be big when we get into the Bill Porter plan. Other students kind of understanding what it might be like for Bill, and then also students to, the perspective of others, and that Bill wants to do things on his own and not to jump in and do everything kind of for Bill. Like Bill can carry his backpack once it's on. He can do that, things like that. But again, you've done a nice job helping us understand those perspectives. Keep bringing those forward. Mitchell, please continue also to be an active poster to this course. You had much that you brought to the course talking about school connectedness, and that is embraced by the Centers for Disease Control. There's a website just on CDC School Connectedness, identifies keys to inclusive practices. Thank you so much for bringing that to the class. I want more of it, and there's great opportunity here in the next month for you to make those contributions and kind of help us look at the school connectedness side, especially, hey, when we get to Bill, school connectedness is going to be big into getting Bill connected into his peers, into the school experience, having a bully-free school experience, and I think you have a lot to bring forward to that. So looking forward to it. Dustin, in response to Allie, you wrote, I really like your idea of running a training course with different scenarios and holding a discussion of how to better adapt to inclusion. This would be very beneficial for new and old teachers, I'll say experienced teachers, to help them learn new ideas and techniques and how to better help our students to the best of our abilities. Like you said above, easiest or most convenient is certainly not always best for the student. And with more education and programs that you speak of doing, the better for teachers, staff, and students. So, yeah, so what you're talking about here reminds me of tabletop activities that I do frequently for school districts preparing for safety events. So, what happens if we have a bomb threat or something like that? Now, again, I'm talking about those events, but the tabletop exercise can be used very much for educational scenarios. So it could be, what if we do have a Bill Porter type student move in? Not that all students, but I don't want to use Bill as a stereotype, but I mean a student that comes in who's going to have mobility issues that we haven't, really had much experience with cerebral palsy. So how do we bring staff up to speed? How do we check our library to make sure that we have books on disability education? How do we take questions from staff? What are our outside resources? And it could be anything that you bring in kind of into this realm. I think that would be a really exciting, fun way to do it. A tabletop exercise that like whatever student's moving in. And not that it has to be like you have to put these scenarios of really complicated things, but I mean, it could even be, we have a student moving into the district who has previous documentations of anxiety disorder where, in crowds, crowded hallways, things like that. So like, where do we consider placement, for that student, and how, let's take a look at our lessons. Okay, well, here's a lesson that's more group-based, and how might we prepare a student for that or not prepare a student that has how do we even understand what anxiety is? Like, can we have somebody do some research, bring some information in on that? But I think you're touching on something here that probably almost belongs in a book somewhere, like as a training book of using tabletops on how to promote inclusive practices. Justin, from your scavenger hunt observations, you wrote, understanding co-teaching models is important because it gives you a way to more deeply consider how teaching resources, for example, teachers and the skills they bring to classroom, are being used in the classroom to best benefit all students. I'm with you, and I'll go back. I think it comes down to teaching licensure and relaxing that silo structure in Wisconsin, allowing all teachers to teach all the students during inclusive activities. Again, not saying that a high school special education teacher should instruct a high school biology class, but I'm saying that special education teacher should be able to participate in educating all students in that setting, even if not being the primary person delivering the original lesson. So, Brendan, and this is where we will conclude for today, Brendan. From your scavenger hunt observation, you wrote, probably the biggest thought that came from these observations had nothing to do with the primary teacher. The observation brought up one key point with teacher assistants. They want to be treated as an equal. It's obvious they play an important role in the classroom, and with that, they need to be treated with respect. The teacher assistants that were seen as an equal went above and beyond with their job description. I've seen that too. It's really tricky because we want to innately value teacher assistants, yet they don't get paid the same as teachers, and we don't have them in teacher roles because they're not teachers. So yet we expect them to almost, step into that pseudo teacher role. We expect them to have very strong knowledge of the students and the students' learning profiles. So I think you're right. Teachers, I have worked with educational assistants who have been above and beyond, and they when they get to participate in professional development, when they get to participate occasionally in IEP meetings and their input is sought, that is so valuable. How many times do we have professional development schedules and it's put together, and then here's a day when only the teachers will be there and not the support staff? It's like, oh my goodness, but the support staff could be there, going through IEP goals, getting strategies for behavior intervention, getting strategies for basic literacy check-ins and content questioning and things like that. So it's one of those things. It's like I think districts that do that, more districts maybe are doing that. At least I've seen more districts do that, include EAs and professional development. I think it does say, hey, you're important. And it also promotes retention of EAs, and that is huge too, because a turnover of EAs is very detrimental to students, and especially also to a teacher, of like trying to bring that EA up to speed, and then all of a sudden, 3 months later, the EA leaves the district. So just a thank you to everybody for your dedication to the class. I know it gets very busy. It's the end of the first quarter, and now all of the first quarter grades are due. Those need to get in, and we're getting into the holidays, so things need to get done before Thanksgiving, and then a lot of stuff needs to get done before the winter breaks. So please be active posters, and what's left in class, and make sure you get in and do it. There are no extensions on the Bill Porter plan. That needs to be in on December 8th or before, but needs to be in on December 8th, and then I will grade that. You'll have that back in probably 3-4 days, and then I need to get grades 3-4 days after that to Viterbo. So make sure you're looking ahead of what your what the plan expectations are. So again, thank you very much. This is the Module 5 Fireside Chat for Inclusive Classroom Strategies. Today is November 5th, 2017. This will be posted and uploaded, so you should be able to see this hopefully in the next few hours here. It is 7:35 p.m. right now, and guess what? November 7th is my birthday. So November 7th is my birthday. So let's see if anyone has watched this by November 7th, if there's a birthday shout-out that's given. I don't know. But I do have a birthday coming up in 2 days. So dun, 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 dun. They say it's my birthday, dun, 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 and it really is. So, all right, thank you very much.